Hello and welcome to another episode of the AAIM High Podcast, standing for Asian American Inspires in Management. Today we're excited to have Charles Kim, a finance professional with over 20 years of experience in private equity, asset finance, and global markets. Charles is a founder and CEO of CRAVE Global, a financial institution connecting celebrities to Chinese fans. Before this, he served as a managing director at China Renaissance, one of China's leading financial institutions. His career also includes leadership roles at Mirae Asset Securities, Lehman Brothers Korea, and JP Morgan. Charles also serves as the co-founder and managing partner of Extol Capital, a US-based growth equity firm helping consumer-focused tech companies expand into the Greater China region. Raised in Boston and now living in LA, Charles bridges the East and the West, leveraging his expertise in Asian markets. Charles, welcome to the AIM High Podcast.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah. So to start off, let's talk about your childhood. Because this podcast is centered around being an Asian American leader in business, it is first important to understand each guest's childhood and upbringing as an Asian American because ideas instilled within you from your parents and your environment, many of these moments influence you as a business leader when you are older. So to start off, could you maybe explain your childhood situation growing up? Where did you live? Did you have any siblings? What were family dynamics like?
Sure. So I have to say, I think yeah, like your child upbringing is important,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think, it determines like your path, yeah, what career
Yeah.
path or, direction of life. I
Mm-hmm.
think people pivot all the time,
Mm.
as they age and I'm constantly pivoting, even at my age and I'm over 50. So I was born in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
I came to US when I was 8 with my parents. I have one sister. She's 2 years younger than me. So I was 8 and she was 6. Uh, we moved to Boston because my aunt, uh, she sponsored us for the visa and
Mm-hmm.
she was living in Boston.
Mm.
So initially we lived with her and then we moved and, we found our own place. So, I went to, so since, again, I came to US, speaking, no English, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people have similar, immigrant story. But so yeah, I went to middle school, high school, and college in Boston, and then post college I moved to New York.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I know I still, even though I lived in New York for a long time, I lived all around the world. I live in LA now. I still consider Boston my home. It's my
Mm.
anchor.
Yeah.
So in Korean, it's called goyang, right? So it's almost like place of birth.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I wasn't born in Boston, but that's where I grew up, and and that's where a lot of great, amazing memories and friends are, still there. So I'm a big supporter of Boston, East Coast, even though I live in the West Coast.
Yeah. Because you and your family immigrated from Korea and you were at such a young age, what pressures or certain expectations from either your family or your broader community did you have, and how did you handle those pressures?
Yeah, I think as an Asian, not just Korean, but whether you're Chinese or other Asians, or even just not, it doesn't even have to be. It could be just other immigrants. I think there's a lot of pressure on success, and which is measured by you know money or some sort of title.
Mm-hmm.
But so and at a young age, obviously, focus was on education, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I remember I love sports. I love sports. I love football, and I wanted to play Pee Wee League, right?
Yeah.
Join the Pee Wee League, and yeah, my father wouldn't let me.
Mm.
He wanted me to study, but
Mm-hmm.
also it was our family situation. Both of my parents work, so I had to take care of my sister, and I didn't have somebody to pick me up, after school, after practice. But I had this lifelong love of sports, but I actually never played sports.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's just opportunities. Also, I wasn't gifted with athletic ability, so yeah.
Mm-hmm. Where did that love of sports come from? Did you just always like enjoy watching sports or?
Yeah, I just, I'm more, I like team sports better than individual sports.
Mhm.
So if you look at, a lot of Asians play in, tennis, right?
Mhm.
Or golf, or it could be fencing, and they focus on that because they think it's going to help them, get their kids into college. But if you look at Americans, it's the more focuses on team sports like baseball and football, right? And I
Mhm.
really like the team sport aspect because you're part of a bigger group, right? It's
Mm.
not about
Yeah.
you, your stats and your wins and losses. You're part of the wins and losses of an overall team,
Mhm.
right? And I think that translates that to even, working, because you would have
Mhm.
to work with a lot of other people. It's not, you don't work by yourself and individually.
Mhm.
So I really, and I really like team sports rather than individual sports.
Yeah. And then finally, like, how did your parents' experiences as immigrants influence your perspective on work and then your future success?
Yeah, you know what? And I think a lot of people went through this. So, when we first came to America, we didn't have any money. Both my
Mhm.
parents had to work, and I used to get free school lunch and breakfast,
Mhm.
right?
Mm.
Um, because our income wasn't that high, and so I wasn't, I didn't grow up with all the, the the presents or anything. I had to work at everything. But I
Mhm.
think it did just impact me a lot. So I remember when we first came here, we were on food stamps, right?
Mhm.
In those days, it wasn't those EBT credit cards. It was actually a bucket of stamps. And I remember we were at a grocery store. My mom couldn't speak English, and she was, we were buying stuff, and she was gonna go pay for it. And there's a lady behind us, and she was getting really annoyed because my mom was,
Mm.
you know, taking too long. And she kind of looked at us like, even at that age, like kind of like with disdain and scorn. She kind of looked
Mm.
at us like if we're not even human beings, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So, I said to myself, even when I was 8 or 9, I was determined that I never wanted anyone to look at us again like that,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So, gosh, so I put full force in education. I had, I never missed a day of school since fourth grade to junior in high school.
Wow.
I had perfect attendance every day, every year.
Uh-huh.
I didn't miss one day. And it wasn't because my parents asked me to. They
Mhm.
weren't like on my ass and, asking me to go to school.
Mhm.
It was just self-motivation where I thought in my mind at that
Mhm.
age, if I missed one day of school, like other kids would know more than me. Like they would have more
Mm.
information.
Yeah.
And I couldn't allow that, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I realized the teachers are human beings. So if I
Mhm.
went to school every day, I sit in front of the class and listen. I don't really even have to study. The teachers gives you all the answers anyway for the test. And
Yeah.
then secondly is like, because you show interest in learning, like if I got like a B plus, they would give me an A minus.
Yeah.
Again, because they appreciate the fact that, and that actually that type of understanding like human behavior,
Mhm.
helped me throughout my life,
Yeah.
right? So we're not robots, we're not AI, we're human beings, we have emotions, and teachers want to be appreciated for all their hard work, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I went to school. Yeah, I would have I shouldn't have gone to school when I had 105-degree fever, but I used to
Yeah.
go. I would get up
Wow.
and make myself go.
Yeah, so you always wanted to have that like little edge, but then also like just continue to work hard and
Yeah,
have
I was
relationships with your
self-motivated. I was
teachers.
self-motivated, and I just said, education is the path,
Mhm.
right, for me, because again, I love sports, but I wasn't, talented enough to play sports. But I thought through education,
Mhm.
you know, I could be in position where people don't look at me, right, as a
Mm.
minority or someone, below them, right?
Yeah. So you're trying to use education to like see like eye to eye with people and so that they couldn't you wouldn't have the same experience at like the grocery
That's
store.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
And it was like as an 80-year-old, it was a pretty, for me, it was a traumatic experience because I still remember it, like,
Mm.
50 years later because it had such a profound impact on me,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. And now as we move on to the part of the podcast where we talk about your education and
Hmm.
your early career, can you maybe explain to us like your academic journey through high school and college? What were some of the things you were involved in? And did you have a particular interest, especially when you were in college?
Well, yeah, you know what? About 6 or 7 years ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD,
Mm.
right? And one of the symptoms is it's hard to focus and concentrate, right? So
Mm-hmm.
someone sometimes asks me like, what is it like having ADHD? It's like, I give an example. It's like watching TV.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else has the remote control and they keep changing the channel and you can't control the TV. So that's your brain.
Mm.
So your brain keeps like wandering to different things and you can't control it, right?
Yeah.
So obviously when I was growing up, I didn't have ADHD, right? They just said, oh yeah, he's hyper or he can't focus. So I wasn't the best student, but what helped
Mm-hmm.
me was my relationship with my teachers and I going to school every day. But yeah, so but I did well. I did pretty well,
Mm-hmm.
because I had to adapt uh, despite my disability, right? I
Mm.
mean, so for me, taking standardized tests was torture. Like
Yeah.
3 hours, like SATs, it was like for normal people it's great because I
Mm-hmm.
can maybe concentrate 15 minutes,
Mm.
right? So try to concentrate, take a test for 3 hours it was crazy hard.
Yeah.
But I did well. High school's so easy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so
Not anymore.
it's not anymore. Yeah, it was pretty easy when I went to high school.
Yeah.
And then I applied to 15 colleges, believe it or
Yeah.
not. And like these days, all these parents, they hire like college counselors and you, you
Mm-hmm.
know, uh, they have all these help, right? SAT
Mm-hmm.
prep and all this. Well, we didn't have money to hire a college counselor. My parents didn't even know, and they couldn't really speak English, so I had to do everything on my own,
Yeah.
right? So I applied to 15 schools. To this day, I don't know why I applied to so many schools. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But I just felt like, okay, just gonna apply to 15 school. I think I got into, my parents really wanted me to go to Harvard, that's Asian,
Yeah.
dream.
Mm-hmm.
So I did get in. I didn't get in, but I got accepted to 12 out of 15 schools.
Yeah.
I
Wow.
just didn't get into the Ivy League,
Yeah.
which was fine. And then I decided to go to Brandeis, which is in
Mm-hmm.
Boston, in Waltham.
Yeah.
And I didn't. My guidance counselor told me about it, so I applied. I didn't know, and they gave me a scholarship, right? Because it was very Jewish school, and they were looking for minorities.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, Asians were still considered minorities. Not today, but
Mm-hmm.
right. So I remember my freshman class. I think there was only 5 Koreans,
Yeah.
freshman
Wow.
class. So it was like 98% Jewish.
Yeah.
So it was so I went there. It was a small liberal arts schools in Boston, and yeah, it was great. It was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you were in high school, did you know you wanted to do something in the business field or like have a specific career path that you wanted to take?
Hell no, I
No?
had no idea. I had no idea. Um, Actually, I wanted to be an actor. Believe it or not, I wanted to
Really?
go into I wanted to go into theater and art. 'Cause I just did
Mm.
theater.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I love to paint. I hate doing numbers and PowerPoint, things like that. It's horrible.
Yeah.
So, but no, I mean, no, I had no idea. Um, but I worked my way through high school and college. Had a lot of jobs. I
Mm-hmm.
did everything from delivering pizza for Domino's to working as a waiter to being a short order cook. I mean, you name it, I worked. And each of those jobs, surprisingly, I learned something really valuable and skill sets that
Mm.
helped me in my career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were some of those like things that you learned, like being a Domino's delivery boy or some other jobs?
So it's all about dealing with people.
Mm-hmm.
right? Sales. I learned about sales and dealing because when you're customer facing, or you're working at a restaurant, it's all about people business, right? Either
Mm-hmm.
your customers have a good experience or bad experience, and you kind of determine that. If you have a bad waiter, doesn't matter if
Mm-hmm.
food is really good, you're only gonna remember this bad experience, like this bad
Yeah.
waiter,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then it impacts your tip and things like that. So yeah, early on through those experiences, I realized more than like learning math or English, any of the subject, learning and communicating and developing human relationship was more
Mm-hmm.
important because
Mm.
everything we do today, we have to deal
Mm-hmm.
with people,
Yeah.
right? And I tell my kids this too. So you only need to know two things, right?
Mm.
It's no, when you graduate, no one's gonna ask you what your SAT score was, what your GPA was. No one cares,
Mm.
right? Two things really important is, can I trust you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do I like you and can I trust you? And then are you responsible? Can you execute? That's it.
Mm.
No one
Yeah.
cares. No one cares what school you went to. No one cares what grade you got. No one cares what you majored in. No one asks. I
Mm-hmm.
think it matters if you become a doctor or something, but even when I go to my dentist or my doctor, I don't ask them what med school they went to. I just
Yeah.
know, like, hey, is this a good doctor? Can I
Mm-hmm.
trust him? Right? I don't ask him
Yeah.
what dental school he went to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I learned early on that, you know, having that one-on-one human relationship was so important,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then because you didn't even know what you wanted to do in college and even wanted to maybe pursue acting, how did you then get your first job out of college? Because you went to JP Morgan first, right?
I went to actually Merrill Lynch. So what happened was, and this is kind of interesting story. I moved to New York from Boston
Mm-hmm.
after college. I lived in Brooklyn. Um, I used to work on a yacht during the day, and I used to go to like acting school at night, right?
Wow.
And I was working for a Sausage Seaport for New York Health and Racquet Club. They used to have a yacht for the members, and I used to be
Mm-hmm.
the first mate. I wanted to learn how to drive a yacht, so
Mm.
I did that, and then I realized like I said, you know what? I said so. I looked at the industry, right, and I said,
Mm-hmm.
wait a minute, Hollywood is impossible. Even
Mm-hmm.
good-looking white guys have 1% chance. Like as an Asian male, I have negative 99% chance.
Yeah.
Right? I remember I went for a role in a movie,
Mm-hmm.
and it was for like a Viet Cong soldier who's gonna die.
Mm.
Right? It was like a Vietnamese war movie,
Yeah.
and I got rejected because they said I didn't look Vietnamese enough. And I'm like,
Jeez.
what? What are you talking about? I'm gonna be dead in 10 seconds, and no one's gonna tell the difference.
Yeah.
Like, no one's gonna be like, oh, he doesn't look Vietnamese. This movie's not authentic. So I'm like, what role could an Asian guy have? Either you're a Chinese delivery guy, Kung Fu
Mm-hmm.
master, or Viet Cong soldier. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I have two paths to my life. Path A is I could work as a waiter to fulfill my dream,
Uh-huh.
or I can try to make some money, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I got into banking because I said, I don't want to go back to school, right?
Yeah.
School, because of my ADHD. I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to be a doctor, right? I didn't want those
Mm-hmm.
paths. So I said, well, what can I do? Oh, I was in New York. Oh, I'll go to Wall Street.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. But when I first started applying, I got rejected everywhere because everybody had MBA, right? From
Yeah.
Stanford and Harvard and Yale. I didn't have an MBA, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I applied to all the firms.
Mm-hmm.
They all rejected me, right? Merrill,
Mm-hmm.
and everything. And then so I said, how am I gonna do this, right? Because they're like, and then I said, oh, I'm Korean. There's a lot of Korean security firms, right? There was like
Mm.
Hyundai and LG, and I said, oh, I'll apply to Korean security firm. So I applied to a few of them. They all rejected me too because they're like, well, you don't have any customers, you don't have any
Yeah.
experience. So I remember I asked a friend of mine. I said he was working for Hyundai Securities, and I said, hey, if there's an opening, can you give me a call,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'll talk to the CEO. And he said, sure. So about 6 months later, he gave me a call. He said, one of the salesmen quit.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my boss about you. So do you want to come in for an interview? I said,
Mm-hmm.
sure. So I went in. I interviewed with the CEO. I knew he was going to reject me, right, based on my CV, my
Mm-hmm.
resume. So I said, how much does your salesman make? Let's say they
Mm-hmm.
make $100,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
For example. So I said, I'll take a 50% pay cut. Give me
Mm.
6 months. I said, if I don't make money for you, you can fire me,
Wow.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I make money for you, then you have to raise my salary. But
Mm-hmm.
within that 6 months, I'll take a 50% pay cut, right?
Wow.
So because I had to be creative,
Mm-hmm.
because I can't compete just on CV, resume.
Yeah.
So, and he said, 50% pay cut. He's trying to save money, right?
Yeah.
6 months, okay, you're
Yeah.
in. I just need to get in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then that's how I got started.
Yeah. And then what did that experience look like starting? Because if you had no experience before, how did you like learn? And I'm sure, how did you do? Did you make money when you were there?
Yeah, I mean, and it was just, it wasn't because I was smart. So yeah, my first thing is I had to get licensed. So I'm just like
Mm-hmm.
studying like crazy, like the first month to get licensed,
Mm-hmm.
and then yeah, and then I remember when I first started, it was Asian financial crisis. Remember, I'm working for a Korean security firm,
Mm-hmm.
and they were selling Korean like stocks to U.S. institutions, right?
Mm.
So, and then it was Asian financial. Korea was about to go bankrupt. So I said, "Oh
Mm.
my gosh, like the worst timing. I have 6 months, and
Yeah.
Korea's about to go bankrupt. Like
Yeah.
Korean won went to like 2000. I said, great, just bad timing. So
Mm-hmm.
I just put my head down, just learning, everything, right? Learning about Korean stock, reading all the research, things like that. Um, this is an interesting story. So one day I was dating my wife at the time. We were going to church. I
Mm-hmm.
remember it was Sunday, and we were on Park Avenue. It was like 76th Street and Park Avenue. And there was like
Mm-hmm.
there was a red, like, don't walk signal. So
Yeah.
we were just waiting at the sidewalk. And there was this really old guy walking a little dog, right? Little chihuahua, but had a
Mm-hmm.
little, like a leather jacket.
Yeah.
Kind of cute, right? Like, so I tried to pet the dog because I like dogs.
Yeah.
And the dog was like, "Rrr, rrr, rrr," just trying to bark and bite me.
Yeah.
And then this old man who was walking this dog, he said, I think my dog likes you. I'm like, what do you mean? He just tried to bite me. He said,
Yeah.
oh, he only likes to bite people he likes. All right. And then I said, well, he's not biting you, so he must not like you. Right.
Yeah.
Um, and then this old guy, I'm just met him in the street, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he said, what's your name? He goes, oh no, he said, what's your name and what's your nationality? I said, oh, I said, my name is Charles and Kim, and I'm Korean. He goes, oh yeah, I have some Korean friends. So I asked him, I said, what's your name and what's your nationality? And
Mm-hmm.
he said, my name is John Slade, and I'm German. I'm a German Jew.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. So, I told him I went to the, undergrad at Jewish school, Brandeis, and we're
Mm-hmm.
talking. And he started telling me his whole life story on the
Yeah.
sidewalk. So his name is John Slade. He died in his 90s. I mean, he became my mentor, but he escaped Germany, rise
Mm.
of Hitler. He
Yeah.
made the German Olympic team, and because he was Jewish, he got kicked out. He
Mm.
escaped to U.S.
Yeah.
and then like in the 1950s, he made the U.S. Olympic team. Believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah, he was showing me his Olympic card. So I said, oh, you know what? So he asked me what I did. I told him, and I asked what he did. He goes, oh, he said he was in finance. So I said, oh, Mr. Slade, I said, can I have your number? I would love to
Mm-hmm.
call you sometimes, ask for advice. He,
Mm-hmm.
he said, sure, sure. Here's my number. And that's a Sunday. So we left. And then Monday I called him. I said, hey, Mr. Slade, it was great meeting you. Yeah, yesterday. He goes, oh, he goes, Charles, I'm glad you called me because I had these opera tickets I wanted to give to your girlfriend, and I didn't have your number. He goes, do you want to come for lunch tomorrow in my office? And I'll give you these opera tickets. And I said, oh yeah, sure. I said, what's the address? He gave me, it was like 390 Park. And then I go there the next day, and I'm like, oh, wait, this is like Bear Stearns building, right?
Mm.
In Park Avenue. So I go up there. They take me to the executive dining room. And I didn't know, like, he was the former president of Bear Stearns.
Wow.
I didn't know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he greets me, and then he has all the traders, all the bigwigs at Bear Stearns,
Mm-hmm.
On the table, and they're like, oh, Charles, I met this Charles, hey, guys, this is Charles, he works at Hyundai. And then he introduced me to all the, this guy is head of trading, head of this, research.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking a little bit, and then he takes out this piece of paper, like a Bloomberg article, and he said, hey, Charles, it says in the article that Korea is raising $2 billion in sovereign bonds, US dollar bond, because they didn't have US dollars. It was in the 90s. And then he said, you work for a Korean firm, you can get us some of these bonds.
Yeah.
Now, I had zero information about the bond. I had no idea what he was talking about. I had no information, right? So I knew it was $2 billion, right?
Yeah.
Bond, US dollar bond, that's it.
Yeah.
And I think it was Solomon Smith Barney and Goldman Sachs was running the deal. So I had zero information, right? So he asked, and I said, so I asked myself silently, you only have one chance in life to ask for a big order.
Yeah.
I said, $2 billion. I said, I'm going to ask for 25% of it. So I said, Mr. Slade, I would love to help you, but I need a minimum order of 500 million. I just made it up. Okay.
Yeah.
I said, minimum order 500 million. And then he said, oh, no problem. We want $1 billion. Okay.
Wow.
Then I said, okay, I need something. I said, it's not that I don't believe you. I need something in writing. He goes, oh, don't worry. My lawyer will call you tomorrow and we'll give you order in writing. And he goes, let's just have lunch. And then he points to the head of trading and he said, hey, are we doing any business with Hyundai Security? And the guy's like, no, we're not.
Yeah.
And he goes, I think we should. That's all he said, right? During lunch. So that next day when I went to the office, I'm getting order from Bear Stearns like crazy.
Yeah.
Right. And we're making tons of money. And unfortunately, I never got him the bonds because we weren't running it. It was Goldman. I never got it for him. He didn't get anything from me.
Yeah.
But we became really good friends.
Mm-hmm.
I used to have lunch with him like once a month, and he was like my mentor. He would give me advice. He worked at Bear Stearns for like 60 years, over 60 years before he died. You can Google him. His name is John Slade, Slade.
Yeah.
But and again, it wasn't like my hard work. It was just my human relationship skills. Like, how many people talk to an old guy in the middle of the street who's walking a dog? Nobody.
Nobody.
Everyone's looking at your phone or social media, and I talk to everybody right now. So I happened to talk to him, and that's how I met him on the middle of the street, on a corner of the street, on the Don't Walk signal. It wasn't a meeting set up. So I think for the young people today, it's really important to improve your interpersonal skills and go out and meet real people, right?
Yeah.
Not social media, not on an app, not on a text, right? And just go out and just talk to people, and even if you don't know them, just ask questions.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people out there with like resources and that could help you, whatever you do.
Yeah. And then how did you make your way from your job at Hyundai to then JP Morgan? And then I saw you transferred a couple times from job to job. So what were those transitions like?
Yeah, so when I was at Hyundai, I was getting so much, I was making so much money for the team, so the word got out. This guy, Charles Kim, is making a lot of money for Hyundai Securities. So at that time, somebody scouted me in JP Morgan and asked me to join, and they were going to raise my salary like 5x.
Wow.
give me huge bonus. You
Yeah.
know, when I was at Hyundai, I think I was making like 75,000.
Mm-hmm.
When they increased my salary to like 300,000 to
Wow.
join the team because I was
Jeez.
making so much money,
Yeah.
for Hyundai. They wanted that business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and then, then I went to Deutsche Bank and Lehman Brothers, and same thing. They just
Mm-hmm.
scouted me and they wanted me to join them.
Yeah. So what was your role at JP Morgan? Like, what would you do on like a day to day?
So I was in sales. I
Mm-hmm.
was it's institutional sales where, I work with all the portfolio manager who manages like mutual funds or private equity,
Mm-hmm.
and then, let's say they want to invest in Asia or Korea specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I was a Korea specialist, so I would talk to them about Korean stocks and, what to buy, what to sell. And then I would, go to Korea with them on, trip to visit all the companies. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And did you get that like Korean like specialty at Hyundai? Is that where that like started from?
Yeah, yeah, because I was Korean and also, Hyundai was a Korean company. They only focused on Korean stocks.
Yeah. And then how did
Right.
you find yourself as the managing director at China Renaissance Group?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I was in Lehman, I joined Lehman, and I lived in Korea for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go to China a lot. So I'm not Chinese, I don't speak the language. And I used to go to China a lot, and it opened my eyes. I said, wow, China is the future.
Mm-hmm.
Forget about politics or anything, communism or anything else. I said there's 1.5 billion people, and you have growth of middle class, and Korea's 50 million people, China's
Yeah.
1.5 billion at the scale, and I said Chinese are gonna buy everything. Once the
Mm-hmm.
middle class grows and they have money, you happen, and every country goes through that stage when growth of middle class. Once you have, and then consumption boom happens. So I
Mm-hmm.
said, China's gonna happen where it's a once in a lifetime experience. Meaning, there's no other country that has that many people.
Mm-hmm.
One language, one country has 1.5 billion people. Look at Africa. Africa has like 54 countries. That's
Mm-hmm.
only 1.4 billion
Oh,
people. 1.2 billion. The whole
yeah.
continent of Africa. So
Yeah.
China, one country, one language, bigger than the continent of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Think about that. So how does a Korean guy get access to China? I said, I need to get into China. I said, how does a
Yeah.
Korean guy access to China? That no, I don't have any relationship there. I don't know anything about Chinese stocks. I don't speak the language. And I said, oh, you know what? I said, you know what? I need to work for a Chinese firm. And
Mm.
all my friends are like, what? That's the dumbest idea. Why would you want to for the Chinese? I said, you guys don't know. China is the future. China is
Yeah.
going to be so big. And yeah, and then I happened to meet this guy. He started a firm called China Renaissance. In the early days of startups in the US, if you want to raise money, you can go to Silicon Valley, and it's very mature
Mm-hmm.
system. But in the early days of China, if you have a smart Chinese guy who want to start a company, well, there was no Silicon Valley or China,
Mm-hmm.
right? So my boss said, hey, they need an investment bank that helps all these startups go from early stage all the way to taking their company's IPO.
Mm-hmm.
And so somebody introduced me to him, and he wanted to open up a US office. So I was talking to him, and it's a very Chinese company, and I say, look, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm not Chinese. I don't speak language. And he was very pragmatic. He only asked me one question. He said, can you make money? And I said, give me 1 year. If I don't make money for you, then you can hire any Chinese guy you want that
Yeah.
speaks Mandarin. He goes, okay.
Yeah.
I worked with him for 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I worked with him for 8 years, and it was amazing experience. Through him, I learned everything about China. We raised money. It was
Mm-hmm.
about timing. We were technology bankers, so we were raising money for all these billion-dollar companies today that you see
Yeah.
today. Yeah.
Yeah. And then where did like because I sense like a pattern in your career of always like giving the people that are hiring you like a proposition of like hire me and I'll prove like my worth and like what I can do. Where do you think that came from? Like when you were growing up or just like always wanting to prove like what you can do?
No, so it's like it's like being blind or deaf. Like if you lose one of your senses, like
Mm-hmm.
others, you have to use other senses to help,
Mm-hmm.
right? Uh, so same thing, right? I mean, it's hard. I had ADHD. I didn't know at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't have an MBA from Harvard, or
Yeah.
Yale or Stanford. So just on my resume, I can't compete,
Yeah.
right? If you're just looking at resume, of course you're going to hire a guy from Stanford MBA.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to pivot. You really need to understand what do these people who are hiring you really want? What are they looking for? What's the value proposition? And how can you offer that value, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without, despite you not having, certain qualifications or the degrees,
Mm-hmm.
that most people think that you need. So yeah, I'm always pivoting, you're always being creative, right? Always, not being anchored.
Mm.
Most people would give up, so they'll be like, "Oh, you know what? How could I work for a Chinese company? I'm not Chinese. I don't speak the language. That's
Mm-hmm.
impossible." A lot of people
Yeah.
ask me that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "Why not? Why couldn't you? Why would the language skill stop you? If you can help make the company money and add value, they would hire you,
Mm-hmm.
right?" So, a lot of people would think, young people, "Oh, if I don't have the MBA, I can never work at, big investment banks." Why? Why? Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
If you're good, they would hire you,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's your job to convince them that you're good and you need, that you
Mm-hmm.
can add value to the company.
Yeah. And then what did you do at China Renaissance Group? You mentioned like raising money, but like what else did you do? 'Cause I'm just like curious. I don't really know.
Yeah, so basically I pivoted towards investment banking. So
Mm-hmm.
if I was doing sales, and investment banking is you're working with companies and helping raise money for them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, from early stage companies to, taking companies IPO. So this was more, less to do with institutional sales, but more with corporate, like working with companies and help them raise money, working with the CEOs.
Mm-hmm.
So, 8 years at China Renaissance, I work with all the CEOs of all the tech companies. They're all billion-dollar companies today. But, when I met them, they're nobody, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
their founder, but
Mm-hmm.
now they're all billionaires. But what I used to do was, because I wasn't Chinese and I speak the language, I used to go on road shows. I used to travel with them all over the world, right, to meet
Mm-hmm.
investors, etc. And I would ask them a million questions
Mm.
because I'm not Chinese. I didn't know. So I
Yeah.
would ask them, like, why did you start this company? Why is
Mm-hmm.
the Chinese, rideshare different from rideshare in the US? Like, why is the Chinese market different? Why are you raising money? Ask them a million questions, and they would tell me because they knew I wasn't Chinese, and I was very curious. So through that, again, that human relationship one-on-one process of asking questions, they would tell me, I learned a lot. I learned, so many companies and different verticals, like why
Mm-hmm.
is food delivery different than rideshare, than fintech, and
Mm-hmm.
learned about strategy and why is China different? Why is Chinese market different? The consumer is different. Yeah, it was amazing. It was an amazing educational experience for me.
Yeah. And then this kind of goes into the next part of the podcast about your current career. So like why did you leave China Renaissance and then start Crave? And like what was the inspiration behind Crave?
Yeah, so I said to myself, again, you only live once, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I did banking, I was in financial industry for over 20 years. It's great. I had a great career.
Mm-hmm.
But then I saw all these founders. When I met them, they were nobody. They were poorer than me. Now
Yeah.
they're all billionaires, right? And then I said, you know what? I want to start my own company. Just try it
Yeah.
once, right? Because so for me, what's worse is not trying, not
Mm-hmm.
knowing, meaning I don't care if I fail. At least I
Mm-hmm.
know the answer. Like I tried, I failed. At least I know
Mm-hmm.
the answer. What would kill me is I don't want to be my deathbed and say shoulda, coulda, woulda. Oh, I shoulda,
Mm-hmm.
coulda,
Yeah.
um, and yeah. So I said I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna do it, before I get too old, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I said, but everybody was focusing on the U.S. and because I knew China so well, and I said, okay, I said that. Then I said, what's what vertical is global?
Mm.
What is global? What transcends language and culture?
Mm-hmm.
Language, culture and everything. It's entertainment. Like you don't have
Yeah.
to speak English to listen to music or watch a basketball game, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can live in any country, watch a basketball game or, listen to music. And then I said, why aren't the US celebrities, like the NBA players,
Mm-hmm.
musicians, actors, how come they're not monetizing like 1.5 billion people,
Yeah.
you know, who love
Mm-hmm.
American music, who love basketball,
Mm-hmm.
Um, and uh, and so I said, I'm going to start a company. I'm going to start a platform where I'm going to work with celebrities and help them build their brands and then give them access to Chinese consumers to
Mm-hmm.
monetize those fans. I mean, in China, look for NBA basketball. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
US population is 330 million. There's 600 million NBA fans in China.
Wow.
Yeah. That's twice the population in US.
Yeah. So then how did you start that and like trying to take NBA players onto your platform and monetize them and like show them to China, I guess?
Yeah, so same thing, right? Remember, when I started, I'm not from the entertainment industry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any celebrities at all when I started
Yeah.
my business. I had zero.
Mm-hmm.
So am I gonna cold call LeBron or Shaq? But they're not gonna answer me, right? They're gonna, oh yeah,
Yeah.
who's this? Right?
Yeah.
So again, it's the value proposition, right? So
Mm-hmm.
my first client was T-Mac, Tracy McGrady. He's famous because he played basketball with Yao Ming at Houston Rockets.
Yeah.
And so the Chinese love him, right?
Yeah.
They all know him,
Mm-hmm.
right? He actually played in China for 1 year.
Really?
And I got introduced him through a friend of mine who knew him.
Yeah.
And
Well, he was huge too, so.
yeah, yeah. And remember I told you you have to understand what the value proposition is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if your client is a celebrity, like what are they looking for? And for them is looking for money. Like average basketball player,
Mm-hmm.
their career lasts 2 years. That's it.
Really?
2 years. So I always
Wow.
ask them like, okay, when you retire at 30 or 35, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? Are you going to go to card shows and sign autograph? No
Yeah.
one's, I mean, when you're retired, you can live next 40 years, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a top superstar, yeah, you can monetize, right? But an average player, people remember there's only 15 players. There's a number one draft pick every year. Somebody's got to go. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
them play overseas, right? Other countries. So, you know, I got my sales pitch, my conversation. My view is within 2 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
you have 2 minutes to convince them the value proposition. If they don't understand it after 2 minutes, then either they're not interested or you did a bad job. But they don't
Mm-hmm.
understand what your value proposition is.
Mm-hmm.
So for the celebrities, they want to get access to Asian market. They want to make more money.
Mm-hmm.
They want more fans, right, in Asia, and they're not doing that right now, right? So I would ask them. I would close the deal with two questions.
Mm-hmm.
First question is, I say today's January 26th. Let's say, Ben, you're an NBA player. I said,
Mm-hmm.
today's January 26th. Are you making money in China? It's a yes or no answer. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
to overthink it.
Yeah.
Either you are or you're not.
Mm-hmm.
So 99% is no. They're not,
Yeah.
right? Because their
Mm-hmm.
agents don't know it. Then I say, okay, then you're zero today, zero
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow, zero next month, zero next year.
Mm-hmm.
You will work with me. The worst case scenario is you're going to have more fans in China.
Mm-hmm.
The best case is you can potentially make millions of dollars,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you can take the blue pill.
Mm-hmm.
You wake up tomorrow, your world doesn't change. You're at zero.
Mm-hmm.
You take the red pill, you go down the rabbit hole, potentially can make millions. I'm
Wow.
only offering you the truth. What do you
Mm-hmm.
want to do?
Yeah. And then you're like hooked instantly.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Either they understand or not. So 30 seconds, they know. Wait a
Mm-hmm.
minute. I'm at zero. They are at the worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
They're at zero. So
Yeah.
everything's upside them working with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then what was like the process of getting your first client and then continuing to build and build and accumulate more clients?
Yeah, it's like anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
all these guys have agents, managers, and they don't know how to help their clients make money in China or Asia.
Mm-hmm.
So same thing, like, when I talk to the agent, I said, do you want to be partners? I said,
Mm-hmm.
same question. Are you helping your client
Mm-hmm.
monetize their fans in China or Asia?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They said, no. Then I said, well, you know what? If some other agents is helping them, then you could be fired, right?
Mm. Yeah.
So you need my help, right? We
Mm-hmm.
need to work together.
Yeah.
And so some see it, some don't.
Yeah. And then who have been some of like your favorite people to work with or like favorite celebrities or athletes that you've partnered with so far?
Gosh, there's so many. You know, from Giannis. Giannis is a super nice guy.
Really? Giannis?
Yeah, Giannis to Russell Westbrook. A lot of these guys, their on-court persona is very different than when you meet them one-on-one. So
Mm.
sometimes you think, oh my God, on the basketball court, they're super aggressive. But
Mm-hmm.
when you meet them, like have lunch or dinner, like a completely different person,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're just human beings, right? They're just like you and me. They're no different. They just have different skill set,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're just great at basketball,
Yeah.
right? They all have the same emotion, insecurities, and everything else. Remember, as an athlete, you're competing every year for your job.
Mm-hmm.
There's a number one draft pick every year who wants to take your job away, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
basketball or football, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they're constantly having to work at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's but I work with European soccer players to actors to musicians to yeah.
Yeah. And then what's that like key to success in expanding to Chinese markets? Like how do you do it? Like
You have to have good Chinese partners. Remember, it's all
mm-hmm.
about execution.
Yeah.
So you have to know what you're doing. So obviously, I'm not Chinese. I don't live there. So I have great Chinese partners where
Mm-hmm.
we do everything from social media, because remember, we're
Mm.
building the fan base, Chinese
Yeah.
fan base, all the way to help build their brands. Like we do
Mm-hmm.
everything from, building their brand, manufacturing in China to live streaming in China, things like that.
Yeah.
So you have to have really trusted partners.
Yeah. So then what does your day-to-day look like at Crave right now?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's never like static. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not like a 9 to 5 job, right?
Yeah.
I'm always constantly on calls. Always meeting new people, learning. Um, yeah, it's very dynamic. It's
Mm.
never. I wouldn't say like so. I would say one thing that's consistent is I'm talking to people all the time, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
Zoom or on the phone or meeting people. I always meet people. So because one of my sometimes someone asked me like, what's my vision? That
Mm-hmm.
was a good question. I didn't really think about it, but I then I said, you know what? And I've been doing this since I was little, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have 10,000 hours to master a subject,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whatever it is, nuclear physics to whatever learning a language, whatever it is. I don't have 10,000 hours to master a subject. So I said, how do I get to have like subject expertise without me studying?
Mm-hmm.
And because studying was so hard for me, then I said, well, I just need to be friends with all the experts. I just need to
Mm-hmm.
meet all the Yoda masters who are PhDs in nuclear physics or, whatever it is, who are top golfers or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
it could be crypto trading. It doesn't matter, whatever the subject matter is, right?
Yeah.
Then I said, yeah, if I meet all the Yoda masters and if I need to know something, I just need to give them a call and ask them a
Mm-hmm.
question and they'll tell me, because they're the Yoda masters, they'll tell me the right direction
Mm.
to go.
Yeah.
So one of my, that's why I meet people all the time is I'm always searching for all the Yoda masters around the world.
Mm. So you can always like learn from their experiences. So you don't
Yeah,
have to
or
put
just
in
like
all
I'm friends
those
with them, so
hours.
like, hey, what do you think about Bitcoin, or whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is, right? I don't know anything about Bitcoin, but they're the experts.
Mm-hmm.
Or nuclear energy or whatever it is.
Yeah. So then in addition to Crave, you're also the managing partner and co-founder of Extol Capital, which invests in like consumer-focused technology companies. So what is your role at Extol Company? Extol
Yeah, so I was like
Capital, and like
general
what do you do?
partner, I was general partner,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like a family office fund where we were investing in early stage companies. So
Mm.
same model with celebrities. What I
Yeah.
wanted to do was work with companies like in the US
Mm-hmm.
and help take their whatever it is that their company's doing
Yeah.
to China, to Asia. It could be
Yeah.
technology, it could be a product. And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to take an equity stake and help expand because a lot of them are only focused in the US market and
Mm-hmm.
they don't have the expertise or the team to go
Mm-hmm.
into China. It's completely different market, language, culture. So they're
Mm-hmm.
scared. So a lot of people don't go into other markets because they're like scared. They're, oh no, no, we can't go to China. We don't
Mm-hmm.
know anything about it.
Yeah. So then what do you look for when you're trying to invest and like expand a company? Like what growth or like potential for growth are you looking for?
I just ask a very simple. I like my mantra is keep everything simple. Like I
Mm.
think the one of the biggest problem
Mm-hmm.
for young people like yourself or people working or whatever is
Yeah.
they overthink. They
Mm.
overthink, right?
Yeah.
And they convince themselves that not they think too much in a way that they convince themselves not to do it. So I'll give you an
Mm.
example. When Elon Musk started Tesla,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't hire guys from Detroit, right?
Mm-hmm.
People who knew cars, because people who knew cars, anchoring, right? They'll say, "Hey, I've been working on cars for 40 years. I've been working at GM or Ford. I know about cars. Steering wheel has to be here, speedometer has to be, radio has to be here." You know what he did? He hired people from Apple, and they said, "Why don't we put a giant iPad in the middle of the car that gives you
Mm-hmm.
all the information?" Now
Yeah.
everybody's doing it, but those type
Mm-hmm.
of innovation didn't come from Detroit,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it could be any business, right? Where people are just too anchored. So they get blinded by, innovation and like they can't pivot,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
I'm not saying like experience is bad, but
Mm-hmm.
experience also could be a hindrance to understand new innovation. So same thing, overthinking too. I think that's the biggest problem. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You just got to do it. Like don't
Yeah.
overthink it because nothing's ever perfect,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? So just do it. And you make
Mm-hmm.
mistake, you learn from it. That's it.
Yeah. And then finally, we're going to go on to a part of the podcast where we talk about challenges and overcoming obstacles as like an Asian American leader. So I was just wondering if, as an Asian American business leader, have you had any obstacles or like, um, or just have you faced any obstacles in your industry, like as an Asian American
I
business
wouldn't
leader?
say obstacles. I never experienced like over like racism or
Yeah.
they
Mm-hmm.
treat although when I was working, they always thought I was IT.
Uh,
It's like I guess if you're Asian, they think you're good with computers.
yeah.
In the early days, right now it's different, but early days they always thought I was an IT guy, right? They're like,
Yeah.
hey, you gotta fix my computer. I'm like, I don't really know anything about computers, you know?
Yeah.
So I think there's like biases. They all
Yeah.
think you're like Taekwondo and you're good in math, right? So
Yeah.
I don't tell them I don't know Taekwondo. I
Mm-hmm.
want them to be afraid of me. And I mean, Taekwondo. And then
Yeah.
I'm not really good in math, but I don't tell them I'm not good in math. I want them to believe I'm good in math.
Yeah.
Because and I always tell them like it's not like Asians are any more smarter than other ethnic group. It's just
Yeah.
they try harder.
Yeah.
It's a matter of just effort, right? Like
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of smart people in every ethnic group.
Mm-hmm.
People give up too easily. That's the biggest problem. So
Yeah.
I would say, yeah. So as an Asian, I wouldn't say like over, but I think in America, you see a lot of if you go look at all the big companies, like
Mm-hmm.
look at LinkedIn and the CFOs are Asian,
Mm-hmm.
right? Finance CFOs, chief financial officer, because they think
Mm-hmm.
they're good at math or
Mm-hmm.
analytics. They're all
Yeah.
Asian, but you never really see CEO who are Asian who are CEO of big companies
Mm-hmm.
like Nike or Coca-Cola, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's tech company, right? Like Microsoft, or Google. Tech company is different.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like traditional company, you never see like Starbucks, you never see Asian.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's somewhat of a perception that Asians are not good leaders,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, they're obedient. They're good at following orders. They're really good at math. So they can be great CFOs, but I don't know if they can be CEO level.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then how has like your cultural background, I guess, played a role in your career and maybe shaped some sort of perspective as a business leader?
Yeah, I mean, you never want to lose your culture of who you are, like you're Korean, you're Asian, but doesn't mean that you can't be in equal footing with, other people. But I think there's good and bad points. So, uh, as an Asian, when I work with other people who are not Asian, it's my job to sort of get them to understand like what Asian culture is. So, it's not ignorance, but it's just they just don't know. Right. Um, so it's for me, it's just like, hey, helping them better understand the culture, the way of we doing things, the food. So, we go out to Korean restaurants a lot. They love it,
Yeah.
and just to have them exposed to it, right, as a culture, because, then they understand that, we're unique in our own different culture, but also, you know, they can learn and enjoy what we enjoy, right?
As we move on to the final part of the podcast where we talk about advice and inspiration, I was wondering, because you are a founder and CEO of a company, what is one piece of advice you'd give to people who are trying to build their own business?
Yeah, I think I kind of mentioned it, where don't be anchored, don't
Yeah.
think you know everything.
Yeah.
Keep an open mind, and you always have to be pivoting, right? Nothing's got people change. Little girls who are 10 years old today, in 10 years they're gonna be 20. They're gonna wear different clothes, listen to different music, eat different food. So people change, right? And we
Yeah.
have to change with it. I remember Sears. Sears was like a #1 department store in retail because they had innovation, which was mail order catalogs. So people used to order mail order catalogs. Then internet came, right? Killed that business. But why didn't they pivot? Right? They thought people are ordering mail forever. Same thing with like Blockbuster, and Netflix. So there's always going to be changes. So you have to really understand, for personally, your job, your personal growth is, what are the changes? Trying to understand what are the changes happening play. Keep an open mind, and then being able to make mistakes and learning from it and being able to pivot. But I think the most important thing is be a risk taker. Like, don't be afraid, because I think Asians in general, I don't know if their parent or the culture is they want perfection, right? Everything has to be perfect, or have to get the perfect score, or whatever. When you're
Yeah.
doing taekwondo, I have to get the perfect, thing. And no, you don't. You don't. It's okay not to get. It's okay to get a D.
Yeah.
It's okay. You don't have to get A+ every time. You don't.
Yeah.
It's okay. You don't have to go to Harvard. Stanford, right? Yeah. I mean, you but be always constantly learning. But we kind of like push ourselves in more of a negative way, because we don't see a perfection, that we're scared, we're afraid to put ourselves out there, right? So yeah, might be a risk taker and make mistakes and learn from it.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, Yoda Masters, just meet people. You can't always be texting and social media, right? Go out and actually say hi to people and meet people and ask questions, right? And you don't know, your whole world will open up.
Yeah. And then, as you mentioned earlier about mentorship and Mr. Slade, and how he helped you throughout your career, what are some of the pieces of advice that he gave to you when you were his mentee, and how did that advice that he gave you impacted your career?
Great. It kind of like helped me accelerate my career in a way that, he was like a sounding board. Now, obviously, I don't have to take everything that he tells me as an advice. But yeah, he helped me, again, because he was the expert in finance. He helped me help me understand where I need to focus on, right, to move up in my career, right? and he was always like, if I had a question or if I was confused, I could just ask him, for
Mhm.
advice or his thoughts, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think having, now they call it mentor. Before they call mentor, they call it like, what did they call it? Like teachers? No, I forget. There's always these people like coach, life coach, or career
Uh-huh.
coach. Everybody's a coach now. They
Mhm.
call it themselves coach. A lot of people want to monetize that.
Mhm. Yeah. And then for the final question, if you could go back to the beginning of your career, would you change anything or would you just keep it exactly as it is?
Yeah, I would change it. I would be like, I think I would have taken the risk and started my company a lot earlier when I was younger,
Mm. Yeah.
right? Because sometimes you get into comfort level, when you're making
Mhm.
money or, when things are comfortable or you're scared, like you don't
Mhm.
want to take chances,
Yeah.
right? Because it's a big move. Um, but whether if I fail or succeed, I think I would, yeah, I would like start earlier.
Mhm.
I wouldn't
All
have waited so long.
mhm. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It was really helpful learning about your story, especially about knowing how to pivot, taking risks, and learning from the experts in various fields. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.